We have understood already the forebrain, which was divided into three parts. That's the olfactory, cerebrum, and diencephalon. And the midbrain has also been done, wherein we divided midbrain into two. That's cerebri, that's the corpora quadrigemini and crura cerebri, right? And we are left with the hindbrain. That's the extreme. If you see this diagram, it will be more clear to you. When you say hindbrain, what all parts are included? Number one, pons veruli plus medulla oblongata plus cerebellum. Okay, so these three are combining together to form your hindbrain. So now we go to page number 194. The posterior region, जो brain का निचला हिस्सा है, you call that as hindbrain, which is made out of pons, cerebellum and medulla oblongata. And when you talk about the brain stem, जो brain को hold करता है, we call that as brain stem. So your brain stem has midbrain, pons, medulla up to spinal cord. Right, we know that spinal cord is the extended structure of your medulla oblongata. मतलब अगर हम ये डायग्राम में वापस जाएंगे, see this diagram. If you draw the extension, that would be the spinal cord. Medulla oblongata extend होता है spinal cord कहाँ तक? L2 तक, right? Lumbar. You have different types of vertebral column. No, you remember cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral. So lumbar के L2 तक extend होता है. We are going to study that also. Now let's understand a little about hindbrain. Cerebellum, you should be knowing what is cerebellum. So if you just mark here, cerebellum is the second largest part of the brain. It also has two lateral hemisphere. मतलब उसका भी दो हिस्सा है, जैसे हमारे cerebrum का दो हिस्सा है. And it is made up of white matter and grey matter. अब उस डायग्राम को अगर बहुत ध्यान से देखोगे तो आपको उसमें arbor vitae दिखा, जो कि tree like pattern show करता है. Surface of the cerebellum, it has gyri and sulci. Remember, gyri is extension. दो gyri के बीच का ये जो gap है उसको बोलते हैं, gap तो नहीं बोल सकते, sunken region उसको बोलते हैं sulci. ये उठे हुए को बोलते हैं gyri. तो gyri cerebellum में भी है. So cerebellum is the second largest part of the brain. Now when you talk about the main function, what exactly the cerebellum is doing, cerebellum का function mark करेंगे. We'll just highlight this part. So you should be on page number 194, where we'll mark the important function of cerebellum. You just count second column here. So this is talking about function of cerebellum. Okay. Just write cerebellum के functions हैं, जो कि start यहाँ से होता है. This whole paragraph. Okay. Let's read it. Let's read. It says, so you can count. Can you tell के नीचे से count करो? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Seventh line. It is an important center which maintains equilibrium of the body. बॉडी के अंदर बैलेंस मेंटेन करता है. पोस्चर मतलब यू कैन ईजिली स्टैंड, यू कैन सिट. बैलेंसिंग, ओरिएंटेशन मतलब इफ़ यू हैव टू लुक लेफ्ट यू कैन टर्न योर हेड, बैलेंस योर बॉडी. ऐसा नहीं होता ना कि आपका हेड लेफ्ट टर्न होता है तो आप गिर जाते हो लेफ्ट की तरफ, नहीं. सो इट्स लाइक बैलेंसिंग एंड ओरिएंटेशन, मॉडरेशन ऑफ वॉलेंट्री मूवमेंट, एवरीथिंग. एंड ऑल्सो मेंटेनेंस ऑफ द मसल टोन is the main important function of the cerebellum. It is the regulatory center for Very important point, okay? It is the regulatory center for neuromuscular activity like walking, running, speaking. Matlab, it's related to the neuromuscular. Muscles and nerves both are coordinating here. So, baate karna. You must have seen some people who get meet with some accident. They are not able to walk, they are not able to speak. So, the damage is on the cerebellum part when this happens. And all activities of cerebellum are involuntary. मतलब आपने कुछ सीखा, जैसे कि साइकिल सीखा और स्विमिंग लर्न किया. So whenever you learned it, it was fed inside your brain. So ऐसा नहीं होता कि after few years you are not driving cycle, you are not going for swimming, आप भूल जाओगे. So that part involuntary, when you are thrown into the water, swimming तो आता ही है लेकिन बहुत सालों से नहीं किया. ऐसा नहीं होगा कभी भी कि आप ड्राउन हो जाओ. आप ऑटोमेटिकली आपके माइंड में, आपके ब्रेन में जो रिफ्लेक्स था पानी के साथ, हाउ एग्जैक्टली यू हैव टू मूव योर, फ्लिप योर हैंड्स, फ्लिप योर लेग, सो दैट विल ऑल will come into light and you will be able to move out of the water. तो आपके जो स्विमिंग टेक्निक्स हैं वो आपके कहीं नहीं जाते. इट इज़ देयर फेड इनसाइड. सो सेरेबेलम इज़ रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर सच एक्टिविटीज जिससे जो हमने बचपन में सीखी हैं या वट एवर वी हैव लर्न, you will not forget because of the cerebellum. The next part, it's the medulla oblongata, that's the extension. Brain का अगर diagram बनाएंगे, pons आता है, फिर medulla oblongata आता है. This is the cerebellum region, right? And this medulla oblongata extends down to the spinal cord. So now let's understand the function of this region, that's the medulla oblongata. So we read here the medulla oblongata, conical part, and what it is doing, it controls the involuntary action like आपका heartbeat, respiration, vasomotor activity, peristalsis. So vasomotor is related with your movement of blood inside the body, right? And peristalsis is related with your food movement. You don't have to tell your stomach, आपने खाना खाया तो क्या आपको बताना पड़ता है क्या पेट को, चलो डाइजेस्ट करो? No. Even you don't know where exactly the food has reached. So it is involuntary. So who is controlling it? It is your medulla oblongata. That's the normal one. And also कुछ vital चीज़ें, जैसे कि अगर कुछ गले में अटका तो ऑटोमेटिकली आपको कफिंग आएगा या स्नीजिंग आएगा, swallow करोगे, खाना मुंह में डालते ही आप खाओगे, swallow, it's something which you have to eat. And when you are not feeling well, vomiting होगी, yawning होगी. These are all controlled by your medulla oblongata, right? Now let's understand the main part, second main part of your central nervous system. So when you talk about central nervous system, you have to remember certain things. So when you talk about the central nervous system, what comes in your mind? One is the brain, and the extension from the brain, you call that as spinal cord. So when you talk about the central nervous system,
controls and coordinates the activities of our bodies.
Our brain is surrounded by the skull, while our spinal cord is surrounded by rings of bone called vertebrae, and both are covered by a protective membrane. Together, the vertebrae and membrane make up our backbone, which protects our spinal cord, starts at the base of above our hips. The spinal cord is about 18 inches long and extends from the base of the brain down the middle of the back to just below the last rib in the waist area. The main job of the spinal cord is to be the communication system between the brain and the body by carrying messages that allow us to move and feel sensation. Our spinal nerve cells, called neurons, carry the messages to and from the spinal cord. These messages leave the spinal cord through openings.
So it's very simple. When you talk about spinal cord, it is what exactly it's doing is it is passing message from the surrounding to the central nervous system.
in the vertebrae. Spinal nerve roots branch off the spinal cord in pairs, one going to each side of the body. Each nerve has a specific job for movement and feeling. They tell the muscles in your arms, hands, fingers, legs, toes, chest.
So another very interesting thing, her spinal cord, it is divided per vertebral column into spinal nerves. So you have different spinal nerves coming out. So how many total spinal nerves are coming out? Learn it. 31 pair of spinal nerves are arising from the sides when it was shown in the figure. See, if this is a spinal cord, you have the nerves, 31 pair of nerves arising from the spinal cord, and there are from the brain, 12 pairs are arising from the brain. How many pairs? 12 pairs. You call them as cranial nerves, and the 31 pair arising from the spinal cord, you call them spinal nerves.
And other parts of your body when and how to move. When a spinal cord injury occurs, sensation and movement may be interrupted, resulting in a temporary or permanent loss of function and paralysis. In general, the higher on the spinal cord the injury occurs, the greater loss of function the person may experience. The vertebrae are grouped into sections according to their location. For example, the 7 vertebrae in the neck are called the cervical vertebrae. The vertebrae are numbered top.
This we have already done in 11th standard. Our vertebral column was divided into cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral and coccygeal, right? So depending upon from where the spinal nerves is coming out, you just call them by that name. अगर वो cervical region से आ रहा है तो हम उसको बोलेंगे cervical nerves, spinal cord set starting from the cervical region. So that's how you've divided it. So it's somewhere around 31 pairs.
Bottom from the head to the tailbone. The top vertebrae is called C1, the next is C2, C3, and so on. Cervical spinal cord injuries usually cause loss of function in the arms and legs, resulting in tetraplegia, which is also called quadriplegia. The next 12 vertebrae are called the thoracic vertebrae. The first, T1, is where the top rib attaches. Injuries in the thoracic region usually affect the trunk and legs and result in paraplegia. The lumbar vertebrae are the 5 vertebrae in the lower back between the thoracic vertebrae, where the ribs attach, and the pelvis or hip.
So this is something which you have to remember only till, let's just change the color. This is the L2 region. So lumbar region में सिर्फ L2 तक हमारे spinal cord extended है. Till L2. Okay, this you have to remember. Spinal cord starts from the brain and ends till L2, lumbar second bone.
The sacral vertebrae run from the pelvis to the end of the spinal column. Injuries to the 5 lumbar vertebrae, L1 through L5, and similarly to the 5 sacral vertebrae, S1 through S5, generally result in some loss of functioning in the hips and legs.
Whether the cause of a spinal injury or illness is traumatic.
Now, I want you to remember certain words before we start with our next lecture. Number 1, you will be remembering conus. I'll just change the color. We have conus medullaris. Okay, conus medullaris. This is one word. Write this word at least 15-20 times in your rough copy. Then the second word is phylum terminale. Then the third important word is cauda equina. These 3 words you have to remember, and don't forget to learn the names of meninges that are surrounding your brain.